Marcus Bennett, a 42-year-old billionaire with salt and pepper hair and weathered olive skin, dropped his leather bag on the snow-covered porch of his mountain cabin and felt his heart stop completely, because through the frost-covered window, he saw a woman and two small children sleeping in his bed, and in her arms, she clutched a faded photograph of his face. The woman, perhaps early 30s with sun-kissed brown skin and exhausted circles beneath her closed eyes, wore a threadbare coat that couldn't possibly keep her warm, and the twin girls beside her, no older than 5, had cheeks raw from the cold and tiny fingers wrapped around their mother's worn sweater like she was the only anchor they had left in this world. Marcus's hands trembled against the frozen doorframe as his mind raced through impossible questions. How did she get here? Why did she have his photograph? And most terrifyingly, why did one of those little girls have the exact same birthmark behind her ear that his deceased sister had carried since birth? The stakes crashed over him like an avalanche. If he called the police, this fragile family would be thrown into the unforgiving winter night with nowhere to go. But if he didn't understand who they were and why they'd found him, he might lose the answer to a mystery that had haunted him for 6 devastating years, the truth about the car accident that killed his sister and left her newborn twins missing, presumed dead. He pushed open the door slowly, the hinges creaking in protest. The woman's eyes flew open instantly, large, dark brown eyes filled with terror and fierce maternal protection. She pulled the children closer, her body forming a shield around them as she scrambled backward against the headboard. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracked from exhaustion and fear. "Please don't hurt them. Take whatever you want. Just don't hurt my girls." Marcus held up both hands, his expensive cashmere coat suddenly feeling like a costume, a reminder of the distance between their worlds. "I'm not going to hurt anyone," he said softly. "But this is my cabin. And I need to understand why you're here, and why you have a photograph of me." The woman's face went pale. She looked down at the picture clutched against her chest, then back at him, recognition slowly dawning in her exhausted features. "You're him," she breathed. "You're Marcus Bennett. The Marcus Bennett." Her eyes filled with tears, and her voice broke on her next words. "I've been looking for you for 3 years. Your sister, she saved my life." The twins stirred between them, their identical faces peaceful in sleep despite the tension crackling through the cabin. They had matching curly black hair, button noses, and skin the color of warm honey. Marcus's breath caught in his throat. They looked exactly like photographs of his sister Elena at that age. Exactly. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "My name is Diane Foster. I was a nurse at Memorial Hospital 6 years ago, the night your sister was brought in after the accident." Tears streamed down her face now, cutting clean tracks through the dust on her cheeks. "She was dying, Mr. Bennett. And she knew it. But before she went, she grabbed my hand and begged me to protect her babies. She said someone had caused the accident on purpose. She said someone wanted her children dead." Marcus felt the floor tilt beneath his feet. He grabbed the doorframe for support. "The police said the twins died in the crash. They said." "The police lied." Diane's voice hardened with conviction. "Your sister delivered those babies 2 hours before she passed. She made me promise to hide them, to keep them safe until someone she trusted could be reached. She gave me your name, your photograph, and made me swear on my life." She looked down at the sleeping girls, her expression softening with 6 years of fierce love. "I've raised them as my own ever since. I've protected them with everything I have. But I'm out of everything now, Mr. Bennett. And the men who killed your sister, they've found us." The first cliffhanger slammed into Marcus's chest with the force of a physical blow. His sister's twins, alive. Elena's babies, breathing and beautiful and sleeping just feet away from him. And someone wanted them dead badly enough to have murdered their mother and hunted them for 6 years. "Who?" he demanded, his voice dropping to steel. "Who is hunting them?" Diane's face crumpled. "Your brother. Richard Bennett." The name landed like a bomb in the silent cabin. Richard. His older brother. His business partner. The man who had stood beside him at Elena's empty funeral and wept convincing tears. The man who had inherited Elena's share of their father's empire because her dead children couldn't claim it. That's impossible, Marcus said, but even as the words left his mouth, pieces of a terrible puzzle began clicking into place. Richard's insistence that Elena had been driving recklessly. Richard's push to have her declared mentally unstable after their father's death. Richard's convenient presence as sole witness to the reading of their father's will, claiming Elena had been disinherited. Diane shook her head slowly. I have proof. Elena gave me documents before she died, evidence that Richard forged your father's will, that Elena was supposed to inherit controlling shares of Bennett Industries, and that those shares would pass to her children. She gestured to the sleeping twins. Lily and Rose are worth $3 billion, Mr. Bennett. And your brother has spent 6 years trying to make sure they never live to claim it. Marcus crossed the cabin in 3 strides and knelt beside the bed, his eyes drinking in every detail of his niece's sleeping faces. The curve of their cheeks. The way their small chests rose and fell with each breath. The birthmark behind Rose's ear, the same one Elena had carried, the one that marked the women in their mother's family for generations. They're really hers, he whispered, and for the first time in 6 years, Marcus Bennett, the man who had built a technology empire, who commanded boardrooms and bent markets to his will, broke down completely. Tears streamed down his face as grief and joy collided in his chest. They're really Elena's girls. Diane reached out hesitantly and touched his shoulder. Her hand was rough with calluses, the hand of a woman who had worked herself to the bone. She loved you, Diane said softly. In those final hours, she talked about you constantly. She said you were the only good one in your family. She said you would protect them when she couldn't anymore. Marcus looked up at this stranger who had sacrificed everything to keep his sister's children alive. This woman who wore shoes with holes in the soles and a coat too thin for winter. This mother, because that's what she was now, regardless of biology, who had loved 2 little girls so fiercely that she'd spent 3 years tracking him down while running for their lives. Why didn't you go to the police? He asked. I did. Once. In Seattle, 2 years ago. Her voice went hollow with remembered terror. Within 24 hours, Richard's men found our apartment. We barely escaped through the fire escape. The officer I spoke to, he was found dead 3 days later. Apparent suicide. She shook her head. Your brother owns people, Mr. Bennett. Powerful people. I couldn't trust anyone. I could only keep moving and keep searching for you. Why me? Diane smiled sadly. Because Elena said you were different. She said you were the only one who ever saw her as a person instead of a pawn. And because you're the only one powerful enough to fight him. She paused, her eyes searching his face with desperate hope. Was she right about you? Can you help us? Can you protect them? Marcus rose slowly, his jaw setting with determination. Outside the window, snow continued to fall, blanketing the mountain in white silence. Somewhere out there, his brother's men were searching. Somewhere out there, danger was closing in. But in here, in this cabin, 2 little girls slept peacefully, unaware that their entire future hung in the balance. My sister saved my life once, Marcus said quietly. When I was 19, I overdosed at a party. Everyone else left me there to die, including Richard. But Elena found me. She sat with me through the withdrawal. She paid for my rehab. She never told our father, never used it against me. She just loved me. His voice caught. I owe her everything. And I have spent 6 years believing I failed her, believing I let her die without ever knowing the truth. He turned to face Diane fully, and something shifted in his expression. The grief was still there, but now it was joined by something harder. Something dangerous. I'm going to destroy my brother, Marcus said. I'm going to take back everything he stole. And I'm going to make sure these girls, Elena's girls, grow up safe and loved and knowing exactly who their mother was. He held out his hand. But first, Diane, you need to show me everything. Every document. Every piece of evidence. Every move Richard has made in the past 6 years. Diane's hand trembled as she reached for his. You believe me? Just like that? I believe Elena, he said simply. And I believe any woman who would give up her entire life to protect 2 children she didn't have to save. Over the next 3 days, the cabin became a war room. Marcus's most trusted assistant, a woman named Patricia who had served his family for 30 years, arrived with supplies, technology, and a team of private security that answered only to Marcus. Diane's documents were scanned, analyzed, and verified by forensic accountants. The evidence was overwhelming. Richard had forged their father's will, embezzled from Elena's trust, and orchestrated the car accident that killed her. But what broke Marcus's heart most deeply was watching Diane with the twins. Lily and Rose had woken that first morning uncertain and afraid, their large brown eyes darting around the unfamiliar cabin. But Diane had gathered them in her arms, murmuring soft reassurances, braiding their hair with gentle fingers, making them laugh with silly faces and tickle attacks. She had nothing, literally nothing except the clothes on her back, but she gave those children everything. Mama Diane, Lily said on the second morning, is the nice man going to help us stop running? Marcus, who had been reviewing documents at the kitchen table, felt his heart constrict at the question. These children were 5 years old, and their entire lives had been defined by fear and flight. Diane knelt down to meet her daughter's eyes. Yes, baby. Marcus is going to help us. We're going to be safe now. Promise? Rose whispered, her voice small and hopeful. Diane looked over her shoulder at Marcus, her own eyes asking the same question. He crossed the room, knelt beside her, and looked at both girls with absolute sincerity. I promise, he said. You're never going to run again. You're going to have a home. A real home. And anyone who wants to hurt you is going to have to go through me first. Rose studied him solemnly for a long moment. Then, with the pure instinctive trust of childhood, she reached out and wrapped her small arms around his neck. Marcus closed his eyes as her warmth seeped into him, filling spaces that had been empty for years. Okay, she said simply. I believe you. That night, after the girls were asleep, Marcus found Diane standing on the porch, wrapped in one of his sweaters, staring out at the snow-covered mountains. The moonlight caught the tears on her cheeks, and she quickly wiped them away when she heard his footsteps. You don't have to hide that, he said softly, joining her at the railing. After everything you've been through, I think you've earned the right to cry. Diane laughed bitterly. I've learned not to cry, actually. The girls get scared when I cry. So I wait until they're asleep, come outside, and let it out where they can't see. She wrapped her arms around herself. 6 years, Mr. Bennett. 6 years of being terrified. 6 years of wondering if today would be the day they found us. And now, her voice broke. Now I don't know how to feel anything else. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching the moonlight play across the snow. You know, everyone thinks billionaires have it all figured out. They think money solves everything. He turned to face her. But I've spent the last decade building an empire while feeling absolutely nothing. My sister's death hollowed me out. I threw myself into work because it was easier than grieving. I dated women I didn't love. I bought things I didn't want. I built a life that looked perfect from the outside while rotting from the inside. He reached out and gently turned her face toward him. You saved my sister's children, Diane. You gave up your career, your safety, your entire existence to protect 2 little girls who weren't even yours. Do you understand how extraordinary that makes you? Do you understand what you've given me by bringing them back to me? Diane's breath caught as she looked up at him. "They're not just yours," she whispered. "They're mine too. I know that's selfish, I know I have no legal claim, but I've been their mother for 6 years. I've held them through nightmares. I've taught them to read. I've kissed every scraped knee and soothed every fever. And the thought of losing them now," her voice shattered completely. Marcus pulled her into his arms without thinking, holding her as she finally let herself break. Her sobs were silent, her body shaking against his chest, and he realized she hadn't allowed herself this release in years. She had been so strong for so long. She had carried the weight of impossible responsibility without anyone to lean on. "Listen to me," he said firmly, his voice rough with emotion. "You are their mother. Biology doesn't matter. What matters is the love you've given them every single day. And no matter what happens with Richard, no matter how this ends, you will never lose them. I will make sure of that." She pulled back, her face wet with tears, and searched his eyes for the truth. What she found there made her breath catch. "Why?" she asked. "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." Marcus cupped her face in his hands, wiping tears away with his thumbs. "Because my sister sent you to me. Because you kept faith for 6 years when anyone else would have given up. And because," he hesitated, then said something that surprised even himself. "Because in 3 days, you've made me feel more alive than I have in a decade." The moment stretched between them, fragile and electric. Then Diane rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his, a soft, tentative kiss that asked rather than demanded. Marcus answered by pulling her closer, deepening the kiss, pouring 6 years of grief and 3 days of wonder into the connection between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Diane laughed shakily. "That was probably stupid. You're a billionaire. I'm a homeless nurse. This can't possibly." "I don't care about possible," Marcus interrupted. "I care about real. And this is the most real thing I've felt in years." The next morning, everything changed. Marcus's phone buzzed with an urgent message from Patricia. "Richard knows you're in Montana. His men are less than 3 hours away. You need to move now." The second cliffhanger hit with devastating force. Marcus stared at the message, then out the window at the peaceful mountain landscape. 3 hours. They had 3 hours before his brother's killers arrived, and nowhere left to run. "Diane," he called, his voice sharp with urgency. "Get the girls. We need to leave immediately." But as he turned, he found someone already standing in the cabin doorway. His brother Richard, perfectly tailored coat, salt and pepper hair, cold blue eyes, accompanied by 4 armed men. "Hello, Marcus," Richard said smoothly. "Looking for these?" 2 of his men held Patricia between them, her face bruised, her hands bound. Marcus's blood ran cold. "Richard. How? Did you really think you could hide in our father's cabin without me knowing?" Richard laughed, stepping inside as if he owned the place. His eyes swept the room and landed on Diane, who had emerged from the bedroom with both girls clutched to her sides. "Ah. There they are. The little problems I've been trying to solve for 6 years." Lily whimpered. Rose buried her face in Diane's coat. "You killed Elena," Marcus said, his voice deadly quiet. "You killed our sister for money." "Our sister was weak," Richard spat, all pretense of civility dropping away. "She was going to give her shares to charity. Can you imagine? $100 billion, to homeless shelters and orphanages. Our father's legacy, wasted on people who don't matter." He shook his head in disgust. "I did what had to be done. For the family. For the company. She was your family. She was an obstacle." Richard's gaze shifted to the twins, and something hungry gleamed in his eyes. "As are they. Unfortunately, their deaths need to look like an accident. A tragic fire in a remote cabin. A brother who tried desperately to save them but failed. He smiled. I've already written the press release. Marcus positioned himself between Richard and Diane, his mind racing through options. The armed men blocked every exit. Patricia was captured. The only weapon in the cabin was a hunting rifle locked in a closet 40 feet away. You won't get away with this, Marcus said. I've sent copies of Elena's documents to every major news outlet. Documents I've already intercepted, Richard interrupted. You really need better cybersecurity, brother. Now. He gestured to his men. Let's make this quick. Bring me the children. Two men moved toward Diane. She screamed, pulling the girls behind her, backing against the wall. Marcus lunged forward. And the window behind Richard exploded inward. What happened next occurred in a blur of motion. Federal agents poured through every entrance, doors, windows, even the root cellar. Men in tactical gear shouting commands. Richard's hired thugs dropping their weapons in shock. And in the middle of the chaos, one agent pulled off his helmet to reveal a familiar face, FBI Director James Morrison, a man Marcus had quietly funded for years through anonymous donations to law enforcement foundations. Richard Bennett, Morrison announced, you're under arrest for murder, attempted murder, fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. He looked at Marcus and nodded grimly. Your sister's documents made it through. We've had Richard under investigation for 2 years, we just needed the evidence you provided to move. Richard's face went purple with rage. You can't do this. I'm Richard Bennett. You're done, Marcus said quietly, watching as his brother was forced to his knees and handcuffed. Elena won. As Richard was dragged away screaming, Marcus turned to find Diane collapsed on the floor, sobbing with relief, both girls wrapped in her arms. He knelt beside them and gathered all three into his embrace, holding them as the nightmare finally ended. It's over, he whispered into Diane's hair. It's really over. Rose looked up at him with wide, wondering eyes. We don't have to run anymore. Never again, Marcus promised. You're home now. 1 year later, Marcus stood at the altar of a small chapel in the Montana mountains, watching the doors open. His nieces, his daughters now, in every way that mattered, walked down the aisle first, scattering flower petals with serious concentration. They wore matching white dresses, their curly hair crowned with wildflowers, their faces bright with joy. And behind them, radiant in simple ivory, came Diane. She had protested, at first, that she wasn't meant for this life. That the gap between their worlds was too vast. That she was just a nurse from nowhere who happened to be in the right place at the right time. But Marcus had held her face in his hands and told her the truth, that she was the bravest person he had ever known. That she had shown his nieces what love looked like when everything else was stripped away. That she had saved his soul by saving their lives. And eventually, beautifully, she had believed him. Now, as she walked toward him, Marcus felt tears sliding down his cheeks without shame. This woman, this extraordinary, fierce, humble woman, had given him everything. A family. A purpose. A reason to be more than just a man who accumulated wealth. He had used that wealth differently now. A foundation in Elena's name provided safe housing for women and children fleeing danger. College funds for underprivileged nursing students. Grants for whistleblowers afraid to speak truth to power. Every dollar a tribute to the sister who had loved him unconditionally and the stranger who had kept that love alive. Hi, Diane whispered as she reached him, her eyes bright with happy tears. Hi yourself, Marcus replied, his voice rough with emotion. Are you sure about this? You could have anyone. I don't want anyone, he interrupted, taking her hands. I want you. I want morning coffee and bedtime stories. I want school plays and skinned knees. I want to grow old with the woman who taught me what real courage looks like. The minister cleared his throat. Shall we begin? They exchanged vows with trembling voices. Promises of partnership. Pledges of protection. Words that bound their lives together not through paper but through the profound choice to keep choosing each other. And when Marcus kissed his bride, Lily and Rose cheered so loudly that birds took flight from the surrounding trees. Later, at the reception, Marcus lifted a glass to address the small gathering of trusted friends and family. A year ago, I came to this cabin expecting solitude. Instead, I found 3 sleeping angels who changed everything I thought I knew about life. He looked at Diane, at the twins now playing with Patricia's grandchildren, at the mountains that had witnessed their impossible story. My sister Elena once told me that love isn't about grand gestures. It's about showing up. It's about being present. It's about protecting the people who matter, even when it costs you everything. He raised his glass higher. Diane showed up for 6 years. She protected my sister's children at the cost of her entire life. And because of her, 2 little girls will grow up knowing they are loved. His voice broke slightly. To Diane. To Elena. And to the miraculous, messy, beautiful reality of family. Glasses clinked. Tears were shed. And across the reception, Lily and Rose began demanding their first dance with their father. Marcus swept them both into his arms, spinning them gently as music filled the mountain air. Diane watched from the sidelines, her hand pressed to her heart, still not quite believing this was her life now. Then Marcus reached out and pulled her into their circle, and the 4 of them danced together, awkwardly, imperfectly, laughing at their tangled feet, a family forged not by blood but by choice. In the years that followed, there were challenges. There always are. Richard's trial. Explaining their complicated history to the twins as they grew older. Navigating the sudden shift from poverty to privilege. But through it all, they had each other. They had honesty. They had love that had been tested by fire and emerged unbreakable. Lily grew up to be a human rights lawyer. Rose became a pediatric nurse. Both carried their birth mother's courage and their adoptive mother's compassion in everything they did. And Marcus? Marcus learned that true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts or stock portfolios. It's measured in moments. In his daughter's laughter. In his wife's hand finding his in the darkness. In the privilege of being present for the 1,000 small miracles that make up a life. If you made it to the end of this story, if it touched something deep in your heart, please take a moment to hit like and subscribe. Every click helps share more stories of hope, courage, and the extraordinary power of ordinary love. Because somewhere out there, someone needs to hear this truth, that family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who choose to stand beside you when everything falls apart. It's about the strangers who become heroes. It's about love that refuses to give up. And sometimes, just sometimes, it's about a billionaire who returns to his cabin and finds something far more valuable than all his fortune combined.